My podcast this evening is with Kwame Johnson, who I've known for good Lord. When did Amir start wrestling? What year?
Second grade. Can't really remember the year. Maybe
second grade. So that's
2009, maybe.
Junior, yeah, something like that. So
Yeah.
quite a little while now. Kwame, what's your background? So let's just go over where you're a middle school teacher in the Chicago
Currently,
Public School.
I'm teaching middle school. I've been doing that for middle school for about the last 7 years, but this will be my 23rd year teaching. In Chicago.
Yeah.
Yes.
What studies are you teaching?
I'm teaching social studies right now. I've always taught, African American history, United States history.
Okay, all right, cool. And then your education background, what's going on there?
I attended Chicago State for undergrad, and then I went to Northeastern for a master's degree, and then I went back to Chicago State for a second master's degray.
Right, so 2 masters, yeah.
Yes.
Great. All right, so I mean, the podcast tonight, I've had some conversations. It's the vast majority of our time spent together has been spent next to a wrestling mat, so it's constantly running off to go, this guy's wrestling or that guy's wrestling and what's going on. So, but we've had some conversations at a practice or this and that about minor political stuff and stuff like that. And then I remember an instance where your son Amir was sitting in front of me with Paulie, and Paulie was having a discussion about what he saw in Rush Limbaugh.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just sitting there listening to these two young guys talk about things. And I was like, wow, when I was that age, there was nothing. Like, I knew nothing about it.
No, I had no idea about that.
Right. I mean, my parents had, I don't know if it's more in the news now or what, but, politics and all that is just a much bigger market or much bigger thing now.
Yeah.
What I want to talk about is some of the stuff we were chit-chatting about beforehand, and it's I'm a guy in a wheelchair, so there's a perception of me that everybody has as soon as they see me, right? So
Mm-hmm.
whether it's they got to open a door for me or what they have to do, where in all honesty, there's nothing I can't do. Like I can get the door open. It may not look pretty
Right.
when I do it, but I'm going to get it done. So, and nobody that's outside of me, even if they sat down, was really trying to figure out how I feel about that and how, my life has been because I'm perceived in a certain way. I sort of put that on as, it's a very small slice of it. How a guy like you's got to deal with racism on a regular basis. Just you meet someone and someone's got a preconceived notion of who they think you might be until you start talking to them, and then it's it's a completely different thing. So we were talking about Black History Month. We were talking about and you know way more about that stuff than I ever would. I am not. I try to be as understanding as possible about things, but I'm not one of these guys that's the woke white guy walking around. I'm not trying to act like I got it pegged. I know anything. And one of my golden rules in life is never to walk around acting like I know anything about something I don't know anything about, because then I've got the opportunity to learn something. If I'm walking around like I know something already, doors are going to shut off to me as far as what I can learn from somebody else talking.
I tend to try not to talk too much about things. Well, I try not to talk about things that I am not aware of as if I am aware. If I'm not really aware, I'll freely and openly admit that I am not very familiar with that. Right. So let me just listen and learn, and I may comment, but I won't speak as if I'm a know-it-all on a particular topic I have no knowledge of.
Right. My dad's rule was I don't know who said it, if it was Ben Franklin or Abe Lincoln, or it's attributed to a bunch of people. It's better to be thought of a fool than open your mouth and remove all doubt.
Yeah, I've heard that.
So, right. So that's what I prescribe to for the most part. And but I do try and listen to what people have to say, and then I do try and understand. It's like when we had the Brett Kavanaugh stuff, and these guys were like, oh, they're just faking it, and all this other stuff. And I'm like, you know what? You'll never, as a guy, you'll never understand what it is to be. The most dangerous thing on the planet to a woman is a man. Like,
Yeah.
that's statistically what's most dangerous to them is a dude. Like, to walk around the world and be the physically weaker of the two, sexes, there's a thing to that. Like,
Yeah.
you have to take into consideration where you go and who you go with and all this other stuff that a guy can't take into consideration. So, like, there's a certain level of empathy that you have to have to even begin to try and understand any of that stuff. So, so as far as we were talking about earlier before the podcast, backgrounds, and I was giving you like how, like, I was raised by a guy who he wasn't interested so much in putting out I think he was more concerned most of the time with anything I did embarrassing him. Like, that would be a bad thing. Like, if there was a time to parent, it was like, hey, you might screw this up and then it's going to look bad on me, sort of thing. He wasn't so much concerned about how I would go in life, where it would take me and stuff like that. Where you said your dad had a completely different take on things.
He was very hands-on. He spent a lot of time with us. He encouraged us to read. He always had educational materials around the house, and he taught grammar school for 27 years.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes he would take us to school with him. So he was very much about education. My mom, she owned a resale shop on the west side of Chicago, and that's how she was like an independent businesswoman, and that's how she made her money.
Nice. So, I mean, I think I like that when we talk about past generations, the way that it seems to me, and maybe it's just my perception, and correct me, I put in your input for sure, that each generation of at least my family is a little less racist than the generation before that. Like, I've never had any conversation with my grandfather on the subject at all. But, like, I've overheard my father have conversations, and they weren't the greatest conversations. Now, he's a liberal guy and everything else, so he was probably in his generation a little more woke, or whatever you want to say it, than the rest of the people that were around him. But he was still, like, the things he said, I was like, oh my God, I'm never talking like that. And then to talk to my sons, it's a whole other thing too. Like, there were still taboos when I was in school. If you were a white girl dating a black guy, it was still looked at like, wow, what's she doing, man? That's weird. Or even the other way around. If you were, white dude dating a black girl, there was just a stigma to it. And to talk to my sons, their feeling on it, maybe it's just their personal feeling, that's completely gone. Like, they just look at it like you're just dating that person. They really don't look at it like it's a racial thing at all for them.
I think there are more people like that. You still have a certain amount of people that are hardcore against it, but I think that the younger generation, their experiences allow them to be a little more open about the differences that people have that are not as serious as some of us make them out to be.
Sure. One of my so the story with my dad, we were in Bridgeview until I was 8 years old, and my dad was certain that black people were going to come into the neighborhood and they were going to ruin Bridgeview because he had seen it happen in south of Chicago and everything else. And before that ever happened, he was going to move us out to Frankfurt, and we were going to be out in the sticks, and there wasn't going to have, we weren't going to worry about that gentrification or however we can figure that sort of situation. And the ironic thing was the day we moved in, our next door neighbors were black people.
In the other area.
In the new area, right? And if you go back to Bridgeview, it's not very African American there. There's a Muslim population there, but not a lot of African Americans. And we got along terrific with the people next door. They were terrific people, and I think it made my dad maybe open his eyes a little bit to maybe it's not as bad as what I mean. The guy worked for the railroad and everything else. I would not say he was the most educated guy in the world. And then one of my best buddies was this guy Pat, who was an African American guy too, and he was around all the time. And I think my dad was almost like forced to be like, all right, something, I must have been wrong about this or whatever sort of a thing. And it never changed anything in the neighborhood, and it never did anything. But growing up, I definitely couldn't understand I just didn't grow up with that like put on me to be, to hate those people.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't understand when I would run across, because we would run across people that did.
Right.
And I was like, whoa, really? Like, that seems so crazy. But it's Pat. Like, he's totally cool. Like, it's fine. So, I think everyone's got their degrees of it, and maybe some families are a couple generations behind some of the other families. But I think that it's, in general, moving in the right direction.
And even though I know things are not as bad, you still have to be very cautious. I have to be cautious and aware when I go into certain areas. I have to think about, where I am. I've had to have conversations with my son and say, okay, well, you might need to be a little more careful here or over there.
Well, explain it. Like, careful about what?
Okay, well, I'll explain. There are certain neighborhoods still in the city of Chicago that I don't think I would encounter a problem just driving through.
Okay.
But that I think it might be different if I was to just get out of my car and walk through the residential area.
Okay.
That there could be a problem with some people.
That's interesting, because I know for sure there's people that'll listen to this podcast that'll be white people that feel exactly the same way about certain areas in the city that they wouldn't want to walk through because they're the white guy or white gal walking through there, and they feel like they would. And I think that it all feeds off of itself. I believe, and like I said, this is just my perception from where I grew up and how I grew up, and I grew up out in the sticks. The guys that so like. We go to like some of the black schools in Matson area and stuff like that. We go to the Harvey area and stuff, and like my son's observation is, Dad, well, why are the schools in such bad shape in those areas? And I'm like, hey, listen, the taxes are picked up on the property value. The property value is not very much here, so then the schools suffer in that way.
That formula.
Yeah, and I go, you need to understand that we're not all equal in this situation. We're all equal as far as who we are. The problem is the starting line's in a completely different place for one guy versus the other guy. So if you're in that school where they don't offer Latin, they don't offer German, they don't offer honors physics and all this other stuff, how the education is not even available to you to get in the first place. But when we do go to those schools, I've encountered people that I'm quite certain don't like white people. And I think that they've been given reason why to not like white people. But my feeling is boy, if we could all just start a dialect, let's start talking, because we're going to find out that maybe every white guy, they don't like white people for the same reason the white people don't like black people, is because they think that they don't like it's a thing that breeds off of it. And if we could figure out that, hey, I'm not that white guy, you're not that black guy, so if other people saw us getting along, they could start to maybe open their mind up on getting along too, and then you have less trouble. I don't know.
I like to to kind of touch back on the community issue too. When I'm talking about those communities that I have to be cautious in, I have to be cautious in my own community as well.
Okay.
But for what I might see as a different reason. And it's just something that you, to me, have to be aware of as a black male. For example, I can relate something to you about Lincoln Way West, for example, when we used to go over there for practice. We were there for practice close to a holiday where the gym was closed. So I would go in there, and another parent would go in there and work out when the gym was open, but it was closed because I think it was run through the park district, and it was a holiday or whatever.
Right.
And
so
he asked me,
the treadmills and all that stuff. Yeah.
So he said, "Are you going to come in and work out?" I'm like, "Well, it's closed." He said, "No, I can just go through this area and then come down this way, and I can just get in like that." And I'm like, thinking to myself, no, I'm not going to do that. Not out here.
Right.
Because I just felt that my consequence potentially for getting caught
could be different.
Be different than his.
And I believe that wholeheartedly. I grew up in Frankfurt, and like I got pulled over one time, and I was driving on a suspended license. I got pulled over for a taillight that I did not know was out. And what ran through my head was, I'm going to get arrested. They're going to haul me off because I have a suspended license. The officer pulled me over. I jumped out of the car, went right at the car. What the fuck are you pulling me over for? I knew I wasn't speeding. I didn't think anything was right. The look on your face says it all. That's not something that you would do because you could get shot. Sort of a situation where I didn't even cross my mind. I was aggravated because, and you know what happened? The guy's like, you got a taillight out. Just fix it. And he let me go. He never even ran my plates. If he would have ran my plates, he would have saw arrest the driver.
Right.
Because he doesn't have a license. And I would have gone to jail. So I was afforded the ability to get back in the car, drive away, where there's no chance.
I would never have gotten out of the car like that. Right. Not to say that some other black male may not have done that. Right. Personally, we were taught not to do that.
Yes, right. Well, I'm lucky you to be taught that. So I mean, there's definitely a difference when it comes to law enforcement, and I am, I'm a liberal guy, but I understand that like just because one officer does something bad doesn't make all of them bad. But I'll add this other caveat. My problem is when one officer does something bad and then the other officer doesn't say anything about it or covers for him and I feel you're just as guilty. And I put that right on anybody who sees the president do something racist or say something racist and doesn't care.
Doesn't call it out.
No, doesn't call it out because they're not really good. These people aren't real good, students of history. Because all you need is the German people weren't bad people before Adolf Hitler came along. It was that leadership that took them off the cliff. And then now, they've got a history that's just awful.
Well, I've been paying attention to President Trump for a while. And, I don't like a lot of the things that he says. But not liking him does not mean that you don't need to engage politically.
Right.
That you need to say, well, you know what, not my president. Well, you can feel that way, but he still is the president, and you need to pay attention to his policies. And if he implements some type of policy that I feel is beneficial, then I'll give him credit for that. But the way he conducts himself in many cases, I do feel that he panders to a certain racist demographic.
Yeah, I think it's a situation where he just doesn't want to lose. I think it's fervent support that he gets from those people. Mm-hmm. So he knows it's a solid voting block. So he wants to just take it as easy as possible and like really, really, really singling that out.
Yes.
Because then, it's bad. And then, people that are, that won't tolerate that. So I don't want anyone to tolerate saying there's good people on both sides of the Charlottesville thing because if you're racist adjacent, I don't find it to be that much different than being... If you're abiding by that, I mean, there's a certain segment of the population of Germany that, they weren't fervent about the racist part. They were fervent about, hey, we've been... The Treaty of Versailles or whatever that held them down from economic prosperity. They wanted the country to come back and be the country that it was. Right.
Yeah.
So that's all they were interested in. They weren't interested in killing all the Jews. None of that stuff. They were interested in the prosperity of the country because it was directly considered their prosperity, sort of a thing. Mm-hmm. And, I think with your tail between your legs after losing World War I, you wanted some vindication back. So I don't believe all the people were bad, but the people that turned a blind eye, it was downright deadly. Millions of people lost their lives because someone didn't say something when that happened. Now, I know it seems hyperbolic to, Donald Trump is in no way Adolf Hitler.
No.
But you can give rise to that sort of a rhetoric that is not... And I mean, if one person loses their life because something a guy says, you know what? Then that's not tolerable. That's not...
When I think about some of the things that he says, I think about some of the behavior of President Woodrow Wilson and some of the racist behavior that he engaged in with the showing of the film Birth of a Nation that praised the Ku Klux Klan. When you're in a leadership position, there's just certain things
Right.
that you should not do. And I do think that his behavior takes away from what could be possibly a stronger political message. And I think he relishes that. So just to give you a more specific example, when I was watching an interview with him and he was asked about David Duke
Yep.
and David Duke's endorsement, which is not his fault,
Yep.
but it is his fault when he says, "Who's David Duke?" He
Right,
knows
right. You know who David Duke is, right.
David Duke is.
Sure.
When he was giving a speech in front of the police officers, a group of police officers, and he made a joke about not arresting suspects too nicely when you put them in the car, and he's laughing about that. I didn't think that was appropriate in a political climate where there's a lot of tension between certain communities and law enforcement. I thought that was very irresponsible. So those types of things.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know, like, I don't necessarily, like, people want to, if I say anything negative about Donald Trump, then I hate him. That's not true.
No.
I don't hate the guy. What he stands for and the things that I see with him are not things that I prescribe to. They're certainly not like, his view of success and my view of success are completely different things. I don't collate financial wealth with success. I don't even collate it with intelligence. I think you can be really dumb and wealthy.
And rich, yes.
Yeah, right. I don't think that's a thing. I think you can be extremely smart and poor. I think that you can, like the things that come to mind are like the guy who thought, that worked out penicillin, and he could have been one of the wealthiest people on the planet from that discovery, but he gave it to the world instead. So this is a guy that, in my mind, is successful and wealthy beyond imagination because of what he's done for everyone. But financially,
No.
I guess not real smart, but not, didn't help him out financially. So, just because I think that the best one I saw to describe Donald Trump that seemed right to me was he's a poor man's rich man. He's exactly what, if some guy in a trailer park won $500 million, he'd buy gold toilets and write his name on everything. And, you know what I mean? Like, it'd just be this superficial dumb shit that he would do. He would, mail away for a supermodel bride from Scandinavia or wherever he could, Slovakia or wherever she's from, because he would think that that's how you do if you're a rich guy. So, so I think that in their mind, that's exactly what a rich guy's supposed to do, is what he does. But there's all kinds of rich guys out there that are philanthropists and they do things that are honorable and everything else, and there's just not very much honorable about the guy. And then his policies, I don't find it great that you can shoot hibernating bears, and like there's just a bunch of dumb little things that I'm like, why is that even but then I look at it and go, all right, well, that panders to a base that doesn't care about the planet. I mean, the thing he just did, he's like the ultimate troll. I think that there's a certain appeal to his base on being a troll too. Like, he did something with his campaign where they just bought a bunch of plastic straws and wrote, because paper straws are good for the planet.
Right.
So he's going to buy plastic straws and write Trump 2020 on them, and then I guess they're a hot seller. People are buying them because they want to just stick it in the face of anybody who like cares about the planet. To me, it just doesn't make any sense. I think the biggest problem, the worst thing that Al Gore ever did was not partnering with a right-wing conservative to do those things. Because if you just would have made it a not political issue, we could have had both sides on board.
If had people more people support.
Right. And I mean, Al Gore might have been all out for money or whatever he was out for on those documentaries, but we're going to find out. It's just like everything else that I remember 10 years ago, climate change not being a real thing. It was all a hoax. And now I think they're on, well, climate change exists, but it's not man-made. So we're moving in a direction that's the right way, but it's not, totally there. So let's talk about the education, the Chicago public school system.
Okay.
That's not something that is in the news as much as it used to be. It used to be. I mean,
No.
Is it getting better?
Well, I would have to look, more specifically at statistics and things like that. But I do know that our last mayor, Rahm Emanuel, when he came into office, he had a very bad relationship with the Chicago Teachers Union, which was his fault because we had a threshold of 51% to go on strike. 51% of the ranking members had to vote to go on strike, which I felt was low, but that's just what it was.
Sure.
So he went downstate. I'm not exactly sure how he did it, but he changed that threshold to 75%. So in anticipation of implementing some of his policies that he knew would piss off membership. So he came in and we had a previously negotiated 4% raise, and he took that away, and then he announced that he was going to close 50 schools.
Oh.
Well, not 50 schools. It was actually 100 schools, I think. But it ended up being 50 schools, which was, awful for a lot of children and teachers as well. But I think the issue was that in closing those 50 schools, that one of the goals, even though it wasn't stated, was to kind of break the union. I think he was very, very much anti-union.
Wow.
And if you closed a lot of these schools, you would get rid of teachers that had a certain amount of years, or some of them, you could stop them before they gained tenure, and they would be out of a job. There would be less jobs, and I think it had an economic motive.
Okay.
But one of the problems that I felt that got him elected is that because he worked in the Obama White House, I think that some of us, meaning black people, voted for him just based on that.
Oh, right.
The connection,
right.
We voted for Barack Obama.
He
worked for Barack Obama.
Right.
That means I like Obama. That means I like Rahm. And that's not how it works. I don't believe in that.
That's the guy with the black friend.
Right. Yeah. So no. And he blatantly neglected certain parts of the city of Chicago economically. Right after he closed the 50 schools, he spent millions of dollars in other parts of Chicago. So,
Right. Well, I feel that's what Biden's riding on those coattails, too. Mm-hmm. Like, he's got a very, very, very staunch support from the African-American community, but I don't think they're paying attention to exactly who the guy is.
I don't think so either.
Right.
It has to be bigger than just who they're connected to. Right. It has to be bigger than just this candidate is African American, because we have some aldermen in the community that have been in office for long periods of time. It does not mean that they are effective.
Sure.
So I think that sometimes all of us, I'm not just talking about black people, but that we just need to pay more attention to policy.
Yeah.
Policy.
Oh, everybody.
And
oh
that,
my gosh.
that it can't just be about feelings.
Right. Everybody works the lazy way out. They work on the sound bite and everything. That's why, like I was saying, I really like the podcast situation because it's long format. We can talk about things in depth. It's not something that, the news, like I said, is terrible. The Facebook debates are terrible. Just because they're just such small sample size of everything. So a politician can make himself look really, really good in a 2-minute soundbite or little commercial. But with the technology today, I think that every candidate ought to sit down every day for a couple hours and just have a talk. Let's listen to these people talk and find out where exactly they're coming from without handlers changing what they're saying or anything like that. Because it seems like any time, and Biden's for sure one of these guys, anytime, any length of time he's talking, he's putting his foot in his mouth. Yeah, for sure.
Biden, to me, does not look very confident. He does not look very strong.
No, I
not at all.
Personally feel like if the Democrats nominate Biden, they'll lose.
They're going to lose.
I
believe
feel that way
too.
For sure. Now, and I'm also a guy that, so I'm always this big picture like situation. I always look at things for the bigger picture. I don't like to look at things for, I don't have a team.
Right.
I feel like anyone who feels like there's a political party out there that's actually looking out for your best interest is a fool.
No.
Because They're not. Now, I probably line up better on the Democratic side than I do the Republican side, just because I have a bottom-up feeling about the economy, which is if you feed the bottom, everything will rise with the bottom. If you just feed the top, if you just cut, massive tax breaks to the super wealthy, it doesn't trickle down. They hire people to make sure it doesn't trickle down. That's their job, because every single year, Walmart can have a bottom line of $100 billion in a year that they made, or that they did. Next year, they want to do $101 billion. It doesn't matter what the numbers is all that matters. So they're going to try and wrench down that trickle down as best as they can, and it won't be there. And I just want to see people have an opportunity. I prescribe to the theory that I'm not looking for equal results. I don't think that's a possibility. I'm looking for equal opportunity so that we can all have a starting position that's the same, and whoever works harder gets there. That's fine by me. But the Trump thing, I'm torn right now between looking at these 20, whatever it was, 25, 23 now, whatever it is, candidates. There's a couple of them out there that I like what they have to say. I've listened to them at length. Some have been on podcasts. Sanders was just on Rogan. Andrew Yang was on Rogan. But I'm not positive that I don't think I'll be that upset if Trump wins a second term. I think the longer he's there, the more rope you're giving this guy to hang himself on as far as it goes. And I just look at it like you're never going to get progressive policies passed until the nation as a whole is kind of fed up with right the other way. So, and I don't think that Trump is in any way a conservative, and it's been so much fun for me being a guy that used to argue so much on Facebook with people that were self-proclaimed conservatives that turned out you're not conservative. You're backing this guy here who's not a conservative at all. If you're a conservative, you should be worried about the deficit. This guy keeps proclaiming that the economy's in the greatest condition it's ever been in the history of ever, and we're running a $1.2 trillion deficit right now. If we don't pay our bills when we're doing well, when are we going to pay our bills? I mean, it's a bad situation that you're doing. If you're a conservative, which they're not, then your hair would be on fire because we're running up this debt. So it's not good.
I do think that if the election were held tomorrow, that he would win.
Do you? I don't know.
I do.
I think we're a couple of, just watching the markets and stuff like that, I think we're a couple of another bad days like 2 days ago where it dropped 800 points away from Donald Trump not wanting to be president. Because I think Donald Trump's more, the feeling I get from the guys, he's more concerned about himself and his legacy and all the other stuff. If he sniffs out that this thing's going to go south, he's got no levers to pull. He's been forcing interest rates down as hard as he can. He's running a deficit like he is. There's nothing. What's he going to do? Double the spending?
Do you think he would actually walk away?
I think that he'll start doing stuff like he did that would, I guess, would hit back on the racism stuff. I was blown away yesterday or 2 days ago with his statements about the squad not being allowed into Israel. Did you see that?
Yes, I did.
I was blown away because, to me, those are Americans. Those are American elected officials. Whether you agree with them or not, they're still an American. I would be just as upset if Barack Obama would have said, hey, Germany, you shouldn't let Stephen King in there because he's a big racist, and if you let him in there, then it looks like you're, abiding by racism or something like that, and that's not good for your history. I'd be like, wait a minute, Barack. That's Germany. This is an American. Yeah. He was duly elected by his constituents, and he is a citizen of this country where he's one of your constituents. You can't say that. You
shouldn't do that.
Public, no. So I was blown away by that, and I think that he'll do more things like that have to chip away at reasonable people. The delusion that both parties have is that we just need our base. There's 32% Democrat base and 32% Republican base, and everybody in the middle can kind of go left or right. I voted for George W. Bush the first time out. I liked what he had to say. I thought he was right on the money. I was wrong. I didn't vote for him the second time, but the first time out I voted for him. if Donald Trump decides that he doesn't want to, I don't think he'll walk away, because walking away, that's not.
Yeah,
his
it's not going to
strong suit,
happen.
No, I think what he'll do is sabotage himself and then fake it's a rigged system and you know what I mean, all this other stuff. He'll create a bunch of strife because his campaign was exploring a network that they were going to open up. I don't think he wanted to be president the first time. I think his wife was not thrilled in the slightest.
I feel the same way. I don't think that being the first lady is a job.
Yeah,
it's a major job,
right.
And
She's
I don't think
excellent.
that's what she signed up for when she married Mr. Trump.
And you don't see hide nor hair of her.
No.
I mean, she's never around. She doesn't. From what I hear, she doesn't even live at the White House. So you know what I mean. Like, she's not doing that job because
Right, she's not being a first lady.
She didn't want to do that job. She's
No.
a trophy wife, and that's what she wants to be. Everything about the guy, for me personally, is douchey. It's like the most douchey kind of thing that's ever.
Well, that's been my dilemma with him in trying to focus on policy. Like, let me try to look at this guy's policy, but he's constantly saying and doing things
Right.
that make me say, this guy is. I can't take him.
No, right. I can't either. And I think the only thing that leans me towards, boy, it'd be great if he was out of office, is the judicial appointments. Those bother.
Those are long term.
Those are long term, and there's way too much power there that this guy, and I don't think for one instant that Donald Trump is finding these people. I think that the people behind Donald Trump are finding these people because they know the agenda and they want to get it out there. So that bothers me. But the destruction that he's doing to his own party, these people can no longer run on Christian values. He has none of that. He raw dogs porn stars. He's got 3 baby mamas. Like he absolutely is not the family values guy.
No.
So that's gone. If you back that guy, don't tell me 10 years from now about family values, because I won't hear about it.
Well, see, that was another huge issue I had when he endorsed Roy Moore.
Oh, good Lord.
I had a serious problem with that.
Yeah,
It's one thing for him to stay out of it. He endorsed him, and there was very compelling evidence of what Roy Moore had done.
Listen, I got in a lot of trouble as a kid. They never banned me from the mall. I mean, if you can't go in the mall, and they didn't ban him from the mall when he was a kid. They banned him he was an adult hitting on children in the mall, and they said, this guy can't be around kids. And then he's got all these women, and I know, women are just dying to come out of the woodwork so they can get smeared by people.
Yeah.
Right. But so that's disturbing. And then the list of things, I know a lot of Trump supporters that I love dearly. I really do. I know they're terrific people. I think some of it is they don't see the things that he's doing. I think the news that they watch doesn't put any of this stuff out there, and they certainly don't put it in a way that you can think about it where you're like, oh man, yeah, maybe that's not right.
Right.
My sons and I were talking the other day. I'm like, there's a lot of things that when it's thrown out there, it seems like a really good idea, but if you actually sit down and dissect it, it's not that great of an idea. And I gave him one. I said, listen, they want to. The Trump administration would like to move our country into a merit-based immigration policy. And I'm like, okay, so and I explained to my son, like, that means that they want people that have a PhD, they want people that have something to contribute to it, that are going to come get, big jobs and everything else that are terrific. And he's like, well, that sounds pretty good. Don't we want the brightest and the best in the country? I go, no one's stopping that from happening today.
Right.
So we're still getting that. But I go, son, on your list of, if you had a list of 50 jobs that you wanted to have, is strawberry picker on there?
No.
Is watermelon harvester on your list? No. Do you want to clean hotel rooms? No. Do you want to mow lawns?
So who's going to do those jobs?
Right. I go,
and don't those jobs feed the economy?
Right. Those jobs are the bottom of the economy, and those people still need to buy shoes and T-shirts and cars and rent apartments. All this stuff needs to happen. And I go, but if we shut that down and the only people that we bring in are the people that are getting engineering degrees, I go, son, isn't an engineer one of your jobs that you'd like to have? I go, the competition just got tougher.
Yeah.
Because now this guy from India is going to get your job that you're not going to get. So I go, how is that helpful to you? And I did it. The anecdote or the metaphor that I use is always, I live on a lake, and the lake was severely wiped out. Like 80% of the fish were killed in the lake. So we were starting from almost no fish in the lake, and we were stocking the lake. What we like to catch is muskies. We like to catch perch and game fish and stuff out of the lake. But the thing that you have to stock in the lake the most is minnows. Because if you just go to the lake and you just stock muskies in there, what happens? The muskies have to eat the other muskies.
Right.
It doesn't work out. You don't get. But if I just stock 10 muskies in my 10-acre lake, but I stock 20,000 minnows in there, well, now we're building this ecosystem. Then I can put some perch in there, and I can put some other fish, and then everything balances out, and then everything thrives. Then at one point you can just take your hands off it and go, look at
Let it work.
Circle of life, all working out fine. If all he put is lions in the jungle, sooner or later the lion's going to eat the lions. So, it's not so good. And there's going to be people that have people that have not. Some of it's on them. There's definitely lazy white people, lazy black. There's just, that's human nature. It happens. But I like to see policies in place that help the bottom, because I believe if you took all of the wealth away from the wealthiest people, but you left their systems in place, you left Walmart in place, you left Amazon in place, but you stripped them all of their wealth, right? 10 years from now, they'd have all that wealth right back again.
Well, it's like when you talk about these, say, programs that help the people that may be considered at the bottom.
Sure.
Coming from a perspective of a teacher, that benefits me.
Right.
The people I serve in the community I serve, many of them are in poverty. Chicago Public Schools, a large percentage of the people, the students are considered to be in poverty, receiving free or reduced lunch.
Yeah.
So it's not to my benefit as an educator to have students in the school that are not being fed, are not being housed properly. How does that benefit society overall in the long term?
Well, I would put it on right overall. That's where I would go with the bigger picture. I would say the white guy that lives in Peatone or Wilmington, it's not going to benefit you either if this young man who lives in the inner city of Chicago does not get an education and does not become a contributing part of society.
Right.
So if we can help the bottom, just like putting the minnows in the lake, then all of us in the end are going to be helped, right? If you're a concrete contractor and you live in New Lenox, and now there's all these guys from the inner city that got great educations and now they've got great jobs, guess what? There's going to be more concrete work that needs to be done because these people are going to build families, houses, more roads. All that stuff's got to happen. If all these people don't have educations, then what?
And I think, in public school, there's an increasing push to go back to promoting more trades. And that's something that's also, I think, going to be highly beneficial in the long run. There was a long-term idea about college, but not everybody wants to go to college or needs to go to college.
Sure.
There need to be other options. And jobs, I feel, are one of the biggest issues in the inner city, because I think a lot of the crime is driven by the lack of economic opportunity.
Yeah, so let's talk about, I know another hot topic is always minimum wage. People get really, really infuriated about minimum wage. And, I always try and spin it like, listen, why we're always talking about minimum wage. Why are we never talking about maximum wage? Why aren't we ever saying, hey, maybe the CEO of McDonald's isn't worth $30 million a year for, saying, ba, 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 sounds good. Because he didn't even come up with ba, 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 ba. He just said, yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah.
And now he's $30 million richer because he was there for 1 year. Where, so maybe that guy doesn't need to make that kind of money. But people I can't wrap my brain around it. But they get offended because I'm somehow... like if that's a socialist thought, or that's like not free enterprise or something like that. But the guy who's trying to get a job and just get by, he's not.
Well, I think that if you're working and you're willing to work, 40 hours or more a week, you should be able to have a decent standard of living. I think When I had my first job outside of working for my mom, this was in 1988, I was making $3.35 an hour.
Right.
That was the minimum wage.
Yeah.
And I'm not exactly sure what the minimum wage is now, but 30 some odd years later,
I think it's 7.25,
I don't think that,
something like that.
you know, based on the rate of inflation, I don't think it's really increased at all.
No, I know it has.
So how are you supposed to live off of those jobs? And some people will say, well, those jobs are not meant for adults. I don't know who says that. I don't think that,
I think the problem is, when I got injured, I was put in the hospital in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And the people that were, when I was injured, I lost 40 pounds. I was laid up where I could not do a thing. So pretty much, I had people 24/7 helping me eat, helping me get dressed, wiping my ass. This is what their job was. And you know what? You become pretty dependent on these people and pretty happy when they show up, especially when you need your urine emptied and stuff like that. I was jacked up, really bad. So you become dependent on these people. You talk to these people, all this other stuff. You start hearing about their life, and I will tell you that they're called PCTs, patient care technicians, is what they are, and they make $9 an hour down there doing this job. It's a bad job.
Yes,
it's not a good job. But it's one of the only jobs that's readily available to them in that area with no education. So you don't need an education to wipe an ass. So, it's a job they can train to do in no time and everything else. And, these people are working. You see them working 50, 60 hours a week at $9 an hour. Now, you've got no life outside of this life here. And then the other problem that the privileged guy who's been brought up and he's got money and everything else and he's worried about his taxes going to that is, listen, if that guy would just make 15 or 16 bucks an hour, he's not going to qualify for assistance anymore, and then you don't have to pay for him.
Right.
While he's making $9 an hour, though, he does qualify for that assistance because he can't pay the rent.
So he is working a full-time job.
More than that.
Right. And he is still on government assistance.
Right.
Because you have this notion that if you are on government assistance, that you're lazy and that you don't want to work.
Right.
And that's not necessarily the case. Of course, you have people that abuse all types of systems like that. But
Absolutely.
That's just not necessarily the case.
Right.
A lot of these people are working regular jobs, as you point out.
That's not color discriminate.
No.
Those people, there's plenty of white people that are,
yes.
There's towns down south that are 80% white and 90% of the people are on some sort of assistance down there. So, I find that and it drives me nuts with some of my friends that I look at it like there's a war going on. You are getting screwed, guy. You're just not looking at the right people. The people you're getting screwed by are the wealthy people, the people who are running the hospital. There are plenty of people with vice president monikers on their desk making $180,000 a year to twiddle their thumbs, to barely ever be in the office. Well, this guy's making $9 an hour, sweating his ass off, wiping asses for 60 hours a week, and he can't make ends meet.
Well, in the last 10 years, I've paid a lot more attention to, the politics in the state of Illinois and nationally. When Governor Rauner was in office, they were going to close my alma mater, Chicago State. And that was a major issue for me, in that if that state school had not been available, then I would not have had the opportunity to go to college, because based on how much it cost, it was very low cost,
right?
About $1,000 a semester full time back in the early 90s, where my parents could send my brother and I to college, and we were able to get 4-year college degrees.
Sure.
So that was an opportunity for us to move up economically, and now that opportunity was potentially being removed. Fortunately, It did not happen, but it was something that was definitely got my attention.
See, now, right, now that's the thing. Right, there you go. Okay, so it got your attention. It probably got other people's attention. I look at the Donald Trump thing as he's getting a lot of attention. Sometimes it's not from the right people as far as he's concerned. You know what I mean? Like, he's getting attention as far as, you got millions of women out there marching with the pussy hats on and everything else because they see this guy saying these things, and it's brought it to their attention that, hey, he's no good for what I care about. So now I'm up in arms. I'm going to do this. Historically, midterms are not, liberals don't participate in them. That's how, it just doesn't happen. It's just old conservatives that show up and vote in the midterms. And this last midterm, the Republicans got smoked. And it's because you're not paying attention to, what's going on here right now. And Donald Trump is the best thing that ever happened to a progressive agenda. I believe he's building a coalition against him by the nutty things that he says.
That he's pushing people out of apathy.
Right.
I think that some of the things that took place in Chicago did that for some. Even in the Chicago Teachers Union, with that example of when he changed the strike threshold, he was confident that we would not be able to get 75%, that we would not be able to get 75% of our membership to authorize a strike.
Right.
But he did so many underhanded things, and he was so arrogant with his behavior that people that may not have cared came out and voted. And I think we hit maybe 90%.
Right. See, for me, it's not a hatred towards the man Donald Trump. I don't hate him. And I could not be, I voted for Hillary Clinton, but I'll tell you what, I was the least bit upset about a candidate I voted for losing when she lost. She was not my
I wasn't
candidate.
excited. I wasn't excited about it.
Right. No, I don't think anybody was, truly excited about her except for the completely delusional who were maybe faking excitement. I don't know what to be excited about that situation. There was just nothing. There was literally a person that was saying, well, hold your horses. We can't, try and get equality. We can't try and get, Bernie Sanders says $15 minimum wage will make someone make $30,000 a year on 40 hours a week. Then they can pay the rent. She said, well, what about 12? I'm like, really? How excited am I going to, listen, somebody should be saying $18 and then we'll settle for 15 and then things will work out. They've had success in New York and stuff like that with the minimum wage going up. As far as it didn't destroy the fast food industry, it didn't destroy restaurants. It's worked out well.
And it's still not enough, but it's a start.
No, right, it's a start, right? And I mean, I agree. And those jobs, the jobs that take no training at all, that's fine. I understand they're not supposed to make. You're not going to get wealthy on those things. But you're also not going to get wealthy on any welfare system. I broke my neck, and everything was laid out for me. I pretty much qualified for everything you could think of. I qualified for food stamps that I've never been on. I qualified for cash assistance. I qualified for, they'd pay my rent. All I got to do is be going to school, and they'll pay my rent and all this other stuff. I sat down and I added it all up. I'm like, hey, I wouldn't mind getting a better education and stuff like this. I do have 3 kids, so I got to figure out what's what. Can I sustain my life on what they're offering? No. I can't. I can never do this, and I can never do this in a way that's fruitful for my kids. I can never do this in a way that's okay, I'm going to take you on a vacation. No, there's no money for
it wouldn't allow you to live the lifestyle that you gotten accustomed to.
My deal was go get my real estate license, get to work selling houses, make some money, and then do what I can for my kids. So I focused more of my time on my actual kids, put it on them as to this. You can do this without any money. We can read the right books. We can do all these things without money. So you're going to get this done. But instead of me trying to make as much money as I possibly could out in the construction world. So, but back to the education system and stuff like that. So you see, what would you say the demographics are where you teach?
Probably 99% African American.
Really?
Yeah.
That much? Wow.
Yeah, I'm on, let's say, the Garfield Park area on the west side of Chicago. I kind of grew up in the vicinity of the school that I currently work at. Okay. So 99%.
Right. So now, how is to switch the topic to? I grew up in a gun culture. I grew up in a gun culture that was hunting and sportsmen, hunting, that kind of stuff. My grandmother was a Marine. My father was a Marine. My grandfather was 101st Airborne. So it was no great shock for me to see guns in the house, to see handguns in the house. My grandfather took a 9mm automatic pistol off of a Nazi in the war, and I saw that gun from when I was a little kid. It was promised to me that I was, the oldest grandchild, was going to get this gun. So guns were not a thing that I was ever afraid of. I was taught well to use them and stuff like that. But there's a gun culture there's a gun culture that you're in the city that's completely different than the gun culture. And I've seen a little bit of it, but there's also this weird gun culture that's out in the country now where guys are, these AR-15s and things that look like they're designed just to kill people are really, 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 really something that they want. And I can't wrap my brain around it because the way I grew up was like the Deer Hunter movie. It's one shot, one kill.
Right.
If I was out pheasant hunting, first I'm out there to shoot something for me to eat. Like I find it weird, but when I see ducks, I look at that like meat. I see that as meat. And pheasants, same way. Like I was looking forward to the white wine sauce and the wild rice that I was going to make with that meal and everything else. So that was the gun culture I was in. When I see these guys with these guns and they're so happy just to shoot paper targets and stuff like that, I look at it like it's foreign to me. It's odd. I don't get it. It seems destructive. It seems like also like I know a lot of these guys like they enjoy it and I want them to have that. But the problem is when that weapon gets in the wrong hands, you've got catastrophic problems because the guy in Dayton killed 9 people in under 30. The cop was there in 30 seconds. So Dayton, Ohio, 9 people dead in 30 seconds because he had the right
type of
to do this job. Now the gun culture that I saw, my dad worked at 72nd and Perry at a Dominic's there for years, and he would go into the bathroom and he said once a week there's a 22 sitting on the toilet paper roller because the guy comes in there, takes the 22 out of the small of his back, puts it up there, drops his drawers and takes a crap. Then he forgets that he put the gun up there. But he goes, so everybody's walking around armed in the city as far as that goes. In your, which flies in the face of if everybody's armed, then we're going to be safer because that's not how it works. They're armed because we're not safer sort of situation. And Chicago, you're not allowed to have any of that stuff to begin with, but they've all got it.
Yeah.
So I mean, what are how is the school set up? Were your teacher the metal detectors and stuff like that?
At the high school I worked at, there were metal detectors, but at the grammar school there are no metal detectors.
Because little guys not as much trouble.
Not as much. No.
How is it? Do they lock it down as far as like?
Do we have like those safety lockdowns?
Yeah. Oh, that's
yes.
Right.
We have hard and soft lockdowns. Some of them are drills, mandatory drills that you have to do, and then sometimes you might go into lockdown mode based on something that took place in the community. And you may have to go on lockdown. There might be a suspect in the vicinity. It might not even be near the school, but you still may get the call that the school needs to go on to soft lockdown. Soft lockdown is you just close your door. You just lock your door and you keep teaching your class.
Okay.
The hard lockdown is you have to get against the wall and keep quiet and shut the lights off. Active shooter type situation. Right. So that's relatively new, and it's disturbing that you have to do that, but that's the world we're living in right now.
Right. So, it's a different world from when I was in high school. When I was in high school, if you were late for school, you could just walk up and get right into school. They didn't buzz you in. Nowadays, you can't get into that school unless you've got access to the school sort of situation. And, I mean, in the interim, that all seems fine to me. I don't like it, especially in the city, because of the theory of the school to prison pipeline sort of situation where you're raised in a school that seems like a prison, and then you're pretty much going to go to prison at some point anyway. So.
Well, I don't particularly care for that term, school to prison pipeline. People use it a lot, and I do think that there should be a partnership between the school and the home. But I would say that you have a home to prison pipeline that, as far as the outcome of your child, is directly related to what you do with your child, the values that you instill in your child. There's so much pressure placed on schools to do so many different things that in reality the home should do.
Right.
And back to that violence thing, in the 23 years that I've been working, I have lost a lot of students. Some during the school year and some after they became adults, either victims of crime, perpetrators of crime. And you always have your success stories. I got a lot of former students that are doing really, really well. But when you're growing up in or working, I should say, in the city of Chicago, these things are happening, and it's becoming more and more frequent, and the victims are becoming younger and younger, and it's really a problem. So you have so many kids that you're teaching that are dealing with trauma, and you don't have necessarily the resources to deal with that trauma in order to educate them effectively. Because one of the things that they're talking about in the potentially new contract that we're trying to negotiate is, where are the social workers? You need more social workers. You need more nurses. You need more of what they call wraparound services to help a lot of these kids that are going through a lot of things.
Right. Now, so there's a culture that I was trying to explain to my boys, and like I said, I don't know what goes on in the inner city, and you can maybe shed some light on it. Like, my sons say stuff like, I'm like, so hey, what's up with that guy? And stuff like that. Oh, he's a dumb. He's bad in school and all this other stuff. And I go, you guys understand that culture that you're in, that's like that, that's good. You should look at someone. I go, I want my daughter to evaluate a guy she might date by how dumb is he, how hard does he work, and stuff like that, because this is who you're going to be tied to if you're going to be tied to this person. But I go, in the African community, the African American community, and in some of the inner city schools, the smart kid is a kid that gets beat. He's the problem because he's making you look dumb. He might get out of here, and you don't want that. So the teacher's pet is the guy that's picked on. Where in their school it's the dumb.
Unfortunately, depending on where you are, that can be a part of the culture, but it can also be a culture in the attitude in other groups where the smart kid is not considered cool. But there is a big problem with that, I would say, from my experience and working in the city of Chicago. That's one of the reasons that I ended up putting my son in wrestling, because I figured that if I'm grooming him to be very strong academically, and that unfortunately he might have to.
Yeah, but clarify that too.
Yeah.
You didn't just put your son in wrestling. You drove your son from the city out to the sticks to put him in wrestling by us.
Yes.
Where we are probably, the demographics got to be over 95%. Mm-hmm. Amir, a couple other boys were the only boys of color that were there, besides the Muslim kids and stuff like that. Right. Now, I've never asked you, your son's name's Amir, you're Kwame.
Yeah.
What religion?
Okay, well, initially...
Not that it matters to me.
No, that's okay. Right. Initially growing up, there was really no religion in our household. The reason I was named Kwame was because in the 1960s, you had what was called the Black Arts Movement. A lot of black people were embracing their culture, the names that we had lost, say, during slavery and things like that, the hairstyles and poetry and art and all of that. So in 1972, when I was born, the first president of Ghana, independent Ghana, was Kwame Nkrumah. And he died in 1972, the year I was born. So my father named me after Kwame Nkrumah. And Amir was named after a black poet from partially named after a black poet from that era, Amiri Baraka. So instead of Amiri, he just was Amir, which is an Arabic name. Sure. Yeah, but we named him that because of Amiri Baraka. So they're not religious based at all. They're more culturally based. Not at all. Right. More culturally based. Okay. But growing up, I attended an Afrocentric preschool from, say, maybe about 1974 to 1978, and that was a part of the Black Arts Movement too, independent black school. So it was called the Shule Ya Watoto, which is Swahili for school for children. Okay. So I attended that school. Right. And then in the 80s, my parents divorced in 1979, and in the 80s, my mother was briefly a member of the Nation of Islam. Okay. So, I would have to go to 79th and Halsted to the Final Call building. My brother and I, we would have to listen to like 3-hour lectures, but I never, the religious aspect of it never really appealed to me. It was just, it was interesting, and I liked some of the politics, but not all of the politics. But that was very brief, maybe about 5 years. My mother may have been good to be exposed to it. I had not similar, but like sort of religious wise. My father grew up Catholic, altar boy, all that other stuff.
and we went to catechism, we went to the communion and all the other stuff that you'd be as a Catholic kid. And then my mother became a Jehovah's Witness. So I was, when I was 12, 13 years old, pretty much going to the Kingdom Hall and listening to, and there was a lot of good scripture. It's always, for me, it's always the dogma that busts me out of it. It's always like, you took this thing that had a lot of good philosophy and you turned it into a cult because now you got to follow these other rules that just the church has made up.
Made up, yeah.
Right. So, and they don't think they made them up, and I don't want anyone who's Jehovah's Witness to be upset. I have nothing against anyone's religion. I'm agnostic. I am not cocky enough or I don't know what to say that there is no God or creator. I just don't believe in one until something is out there that would show me something that says that there is, and I'll be open-minded about it. But anyway, so I was exposed to that, and I would say they're extreme. You know what I mean? As far as that goes. I mean, my mom won't vote. She won't have anything to do with any holidays, all that stuff. And it's definitely foreign to the family as far as, like, there's no Christmas. There's no, none of that stuff.
With my parents being from the South, they grew up in the Baptist church.
Right.
But maybe I remember having a Christmas tree one time. After that, it was pretty much Kwanzaa in our household, which was a cultural celebration. It's non-religious cultural celebration. And my father, my father and mother, they stay with me now, so we still actually do the Kwanzaa celebration in our house.
Yeah. I mean, and I see a more of a need for an African American family to try and reclaim that culture because you didn't give it up.
No,
it was forcibly taken away.
Yeah.
So that would lead me to the other thing that's been in the news, and that we talked a little bit about it before we got on the podcast, is, the Democrats are, I swear to God, why does this stuff comes up during an election drives me nuts, because it seems third railish, but the reparations thing.
Okay.
It seems like a thing that, the population of the country is 11% African American.
Right.
So I know that they want to pander to those people, but if you were actually interested in action being done, and I am, I'd like to see something done, because, the more I look into the big picture of the way that wealth was distributed and the way that wealth was obtained by the hands of African Americans that were slaves, there's all kinds of wealthy people and wealthy organizations that started out as plantations, and they built their wealth off of that slave labor.
Absolutely correct.
Right.
So there's a difference to me between feeling that reparations are warranted, which I feel that they are, and me believing that the Democrats are sincere in their discussions of it. I do
if
not.
You're sincere in your discussion, right? You do not when think you're already elected.
I do not think that they're sincere at all. I also think that a lot of people have a misunderstanding about reparations in the sense that it's something that's new that black people have advocated for, and it's not something new. It's something that black people have advocated for since slavery ended. So you have some people that argue against it and say, well, black people today have no connection to those people that were actually slaves. But when black people that literally came out of slavery were advocating for that, they were actually persecuted and in some cases jailed for advocating for those reparations. So there's a connection. So you can't just negate it just based on the fact that the people today aren't directly connected. Also, people misunderstand and think that when people advocate for reparations, at least the previous activists that I'm aware of, that they're saying, oh, each individual African American is going to receive some type of reparations check. And that is also not what it's about, or that you, for example, you need to pay me reparations.
The me thing is the
That's
thing,
not what they're saying.
Right. The me thing is the thing that so I've always been the person that prescribes to the theory that, we divide ourselves by race and religion and all that sort of stuff, because the actual battle that's going on is among the very, very wealthy and then the working people. And the very wealthy have this design that we're going to work, pay all the taxes, pay for all the roads. They're just there to take advantage of all these systems. People don't put into perspective that, like, I look at a company like Amazon and say, you hire all these people, you're obligated to pay more in taxes than the guy working for you. Your rate should be astronomically higher. And the reason your rate should be higher is you are taking benefit in the fact that your entire workforce can read, write, and do arithmetic because of public schools that you're not paying anything into. So your entire workforce is educated due to tax dollars that your workforce pays 99% of because you pay no taxes.
Right.
So and then like extrapolate that out to the roads. Now listen, I'm fine with I got to pay taxes so I can drive on good roads. But Jeff Bezos should pay way more taxes because he's got way more trucks on those roads, and they're doing way more damage to the roads than I could ever do. So, and it also is imperative that those roads are in good shape so he can make the profits that he makes because he needs to get his materials from one place to another. If the roads are shot for me, yeah, I'll have to find another road to go or whatever like that. But his whole operation slows down when they don't have superhighways to get things to places. So there's a certain obligation that those people should have to pay more into a system that's working out so splendidly for them that they're not. And when when you got a company that is bringing in $11 billion and pays zero federal taxes, we've got a serious problem in the balance of how this is going on in this country. But if you're one of those wealthy people, what you need to do is keep people like me and you apart, because if we all get together, we outnumber them immensely. So the thing is they sell a lot of poor white people on, yeah, we see that you're poor and you're white, but at least you're not black, and this guy.
And that's been done for a very long time.
Right.
And one of the things that I think that some people miss, say when I have discussions with other African Americans, I do a lot of, like you said, on Facebook, you miss the classism. You focus on racism, and racism is real and it's there, but it's not the only thing. You also have classism, where you have people that are in the same demographic, you're just not the same race, and you're arguing with each other when you actually have more in common,
way more
as far as your interests, that you need to focus on what are your interests. Kind of back to the Chicago Teachers Union. We don't all have to like each other. It's not. I'm sure there are racists in the Chicago Teachers Union, and there are people of all different races. But we have to get together in order to make our union effective against the people that are trying to minimize what they pay us and how they allocate benefits towards us.
Right.
So just briefly back to reparations.
Yeah.
From my understanding of reparations. From the people that I knew that were involved in it decades ago, they were looking into the books, if you will, of these different companies and their legacy, their connection to economic connection to slavery and how they benefited financially. And those are the entities that they would go after for reparations. They're not asking Joe Blow, around the corner, like,
the janitor at the school
cut me a check. That's not how.
No, what's the college? There's a college that I just saw in the news, Georgetown or something like that, that was built. The actual physical buildings were built with slave labor, and a lot of the wealth that was built into that school was derived from slave labor. And they were saying that they were going to go back through the books and try and figure out who they owe, and they would pay them with education. Right. They would say, "Listen, here's your education." And there would be nothing.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
I don't either.
We sometimes have such a sanitized version of American history. So when typically people have these types of conversations, you have a lot of people saying things like, "Well, that's why the Civil War was fought," and as if when slavery ended in 1865, it was like a magic wand, and all of these wrongs were set right. If that were the case, you wouldn't need a civil rights movement 100 years later. No. And if I'm born in 1972, you wouldn't need a Voting Rights Act passed in 1965. That's 7 years before I'm born.
Sure.
So if these things were corrected, then you wouldn't have as many of these issues that we have to deal with today. And what I also don't care for is when people try to frame those past wrongs in a very rigidly partisan way. Well, the Democrats formed the Klan, and the Democrats did this. Is like, listen,
that one drives me nuts.
Listen, these things were not able to fester for 100 years without both parties playing their role in
Right.
what took place.
Besides the
It
fact
doesn't.
that
That's not how it went.
besides the fact that we had this weird thing that happened in our history where somehow the parties flip-flopped and we went from the Republican Party was the Progressive Party at one time, which if you're paying attention and you want to know history, not you want to be right in this stupid the Facebook debate thing. I'm out of it. I don't even mess with it anymore just because it's a terrible format. But if you want to understand history, not just be right in a debate, then you need to understand that the Republicans were at one time the progressives and Democrats were the conservative party. Okay, so if we just take stop the party thing, like I said in the beginning, anybody who thinks that there's a political party out there that is looking out for your best interest as a middle class American, you're a fool. They're not. They're looking for their corporate owner's best interest, and that's it. And if making you fight is part of their corporate best interest, then
they'll make you
fight.
Yeah.
So the situation that I have is you have to look at progressive and conservative things, and I don't. It's almost like somebody devised it to take. There's certain things in conservatism, like a base of conservatism, where you say, listen, we can't live beyond our means. We can't spend money we don't have. But that's all fine and logical, right? How the conservatives seem to have melded with the business situation where part of conservatism is giving huge tax breaks to wealthy people. And they've also grabbed a hold of the Christian vote also boggles my mind because I've read the Bible at length. I've done a 4-year class where I studied scripture, and if you studied that book, they don't go together. A wealthy man walked up to Jesus and he said, Lord, I've heard your preachings, I've heard your teachings, they're wonderful. What do I have to do to follow you? And he goes, it's simple, son. Just take everything you own, get rid of it, and follow me.
Right.
He's like, well, I can't.
You can't do that.
I can't do that. Like, that's the one thing, in the story, Jesus knew that's the one thing he couldn't do. That's why he said it to him, because this is the thing you got to do. So when they take the Christian right and then you take this economic, and there's also the, it's easier for a camel to pass through the eye of a needle than it is for a wealthy man to make it to the kingdom of heaven. If you just it took me 3 seconds to say that, and you can't understand that this wealthy guy's got less chance of being in the kingdom of heaven. So how do these two things go together? I don't understand. If you look at the teachings of that philosophy of Jesus, he fed the poor. He took in refugees, and these people hate refugees. My head spins when I'm trying to wrap my brain around, and then even as a guy who's white guy from the suburbs, I start to think there's a racial aspect to this. There has to be, because I can't put my finger on how any of this other stuff goes together. The economy went to shit under George W. Bush. The trajectory was going up with Barack Obama. It's on the exact same trajectory now, but there is a big portion of the population that believes the day that Donald Trump took office, somehow that trajectory changed. It didn't. It's done the same thing. If you look at the first 2.5 years of Barack Obama's presidency and the first 2.5 years, that's all you got for Donald Trump, and you look at the stock market, the percentage of stock market went up with Barack Obama was more than it was with Donald Trump. People will argue that. That's not an arguable. You just need to look at the facts. These are the numbers. It went up this percentage. Those are the numbers that went up that percentage. It's not a debatable thing. This is was it hot on Saturday? Yes, it was. That's it. So some of that stuff all boggles my mind. I don't want it to be racism. I'm positive that with a lot of the Trump supporters that are dear friends of mine, it's not. It's not a racist thing.
Right.
Maybe it's a news thing where they're getting their news from a certain angle that they're getting it from all the time. And then, the sound bites sound good, so I'm going with that. And then I think people get entrenched in what they believe, and then it becomes a fight.
Right.
I'm going to fight with you about what I believe. I think it's in all of our best interest to get a conversation going on where people talk about things and we can get, a better thing going on. As far as my view on the reparations, I would have been 100% fine with when slavery ended, the 40 acres and a mule thing happening. Now,
it happened.
Right.
But then they
rescinded it. That's right.
Yeah, they took it back.
Booth shot Lincoln, and then the next president was like, oh, no, we're not doing any of that.
Right.
And the people who did obtain land, like there was just like I was talking to you about a op-ed in the Post about the way that the wealth was. When they talk about reparations, they talk about looking at the books and saying, okay, if Johnson & Johnson, the company, started out as a plantation in Kentucky, and you got all your wealth to start this thing with that, then Johnson & Johnson owes, because the scales were tilted that you took the wealth from those people.
Right.
Give it back.
And it could be paid in the form of economic development, job training, education. It's not checks like, oh, here's your reparations check.
And that's not even that would be the easy way out, the reparations. Because honestly, if you're the owner of Walmart and you're like, all right, so what do I got to do? I got to write $50 billion out. That's 1 year's, that we made $50 billion out that's one of the 4 kids' net worth out in reparations. $50 billion. That's paying a lot to 11% of the population. And then we're done. I'm telling you, if you just cut people checks, 10 years from now, Walmart will have all that damn money back.
They have it back.
And I mean, and it may be a little bit racist, or my joke was, if you went to the poorest people in the country, white, black, whatever color they are, and you took the wealthiest people's wealth and you gave it to the poorest people, you would see nothing but big screen TVs, trailer parks, spinny rims, just the dumbest shit in the world bought. And then that wealth would be gone. It'd go right back up to the top as fast as they got it.
Right. So
you need to do things like you said, education. Education is whether it's a trade
yes.
or book education, that an engineering degree, whatever it is, that used to be the great equalizer, right? If you were a middle to lower class person coming up, you could get your kids to go through college and they could raise their standard. Now, a cost of education has become prohibitive.
So it's so far out of reach for so many.
Right. It's almost impossible to get that done. So I don't know. My stance on reparations is something should be looked at if your massive wealth that you built was built on slavery. That's a problem. Now, my other problem that seems to go away over time, but for me it's taken too long. I was at a Christmas party a bunch of years back, and it's all white, and there's people there, and they're drinking, but the N-word starts coming out. And I'm sitting there, and I was like, huh, all right. And then a guy looked over at me, and I saw the wide-eyed, and I was like, he's like, you got a problem? And I'm like, yeah, I got a problem. How are we talking like this? What's this conversation about? Like, what are we doing? And he's like, well, there's no black people here. And I'm like,
that's
what does
not
that
the
matter?
point.
And I go, I'm embarrassed, not because I think some black guy's going to be offended. I'm embarrassed because that's an embarrassing time in white history, and you're bringing it up. Like, what are you bringing it up for? You should be ashamed of that situation. If you brought it up in a situation where you actually looked at what, then that leads me back to the Facebook debates. The problem with Facebook debates is the baseline of facts. I've had people say to me, slavery wasn't that bad. There were all kinds of people that wish it came back.
Well, that was part of the argument of the South, that slavery was a civilizing force for black people, that we are helping black people. We're not hurting black people. They're ignorant heathen savages in Africa, and we are allowing them to come here and become Christians, and we are civilizing them. And then when slavery ended, the argument changed. Without the civilizing influence of white men under slavery, black people reverted back to savagery. And now this is why we have to lynch them. So the good old South, with loyal blacks, and that was something that was promoted in films, Shirley Temple films, and black men dancing and smiling and singing on the plantation, the mammy and all of that type of stuff.
Right.
So some people actually bought into that.
Totally, but I think it's convenient. I think that there's a certain amount of mental gymnastics that goes on with people that want to believe a certain thing. So when they hear that soundbite, they're like, yeah. And Like there was one that was they were telling me that, there were all kinds of black people that wished they could just go back to the way it was. I'm like, no, I don't.
No,
think
no. If you look at slave narratives, you will hear black people talk about, you always have a variety of masters. Some were better than others.
Right.
Some were harsher than others. And when slavery ended, there was not much given to people that were in slavery, so they were destitute. So if it came down to living here and starving, or going back to the plantation potentially and having a meal
Right.
and a place to stay, even
Right.
though it was terrible, you might hear someone speak that way.
Right, but
it
you
doesn't
weren't
mean that
starving-
slavery was like,
Right.
oh man, I
you
just
weren't
would love to
starving
go.
because
No,
you didn't want to work. You were starving because you had no opportunity.
you had no opportunity.
Right, right.
The situation was just restructured. Slavery was just changed into sharecropping, and then you had vagrancy laws that allowed black men in particular to be locked up and put on chain gangs or
that's one
other
of the things
situations
in the Constitution where they outlawed slavery, but they didn't outlaw if you were put in prison.
Right.
And now the private prison system, there's a lot of slavery that's going on there, where guys are making $1 a day.
Prison for profit.
The prison for profit system, where they're making. That's the new slavery, and that's not a. You don't have to be black for that. You can be any color, just in the prison, and you're working for free. I mean, there's other countries that we can look at that you can say rehabilitation is possible, but not in the way we do it.
You really don't hear that word anymore. When I was growing up, I heard about prison, and you go to prison to be rehabilitated. I don't really remember the last time I heard that term used to describe going to prison.
Because that's a verb. You need to actively be rehabilitated. Where you're just locked up in a penitentiary, that you're just stuck in a freaking place. To me, it's another one of those big picture things. If you look at that situation, you say, okay, we took this guy who did this, white, black, Mexican, whatever you took him, and you caught him doing something wrong, and what do? You put him in with a whole mess of other people that did stuff wrong, so they can hatch new ideas on how to do stuff wrong. They can compare notes and become better criminals. So it's not a situation where there are other countries who have the drug issue. I mean, they have rehabilitated, people off of drugs instead of criminalizing it.
Well, so many things are criminalized. And when I was mentioning to you that I began to pay more attention to state and national politics, say in the last 10 years or so, under Rahm Emanuel, they shut down a lot of mental health facilities in the city of Chicago. Then I read an article at one point that said that the Cook County Jail by default had become like one of the largest mental institutions in the state of Illinois. And it kind of directly affected me because I had a close friend who was having some mental health issues, and instead of receiving treatment, he was placed in Cook County Jail.
Oh, wow.
And he ended up deceased. Right. He got into an altercation with another mental patient, and he was murdered in the jail.
Right. Well,
so then you see those policies,
that's
and you see the impact of those
cop
policies.
situations that happen too. The guy's not mentally stable, but the cop doesn't understand that. I don't blame the cop for that situation. Right. This guy's acting erratic. He's been told a million times that these people here down here are going to kill you. So he shoots the guy because the guy's acting. He's not following what the guy wants him to do. It's a mental health problem that's going on. It's an epidemic that's going on.
And I've been noticing that a lot more, even in, I'm not a doctor or anything, but I've been noticing when I was at a high school, I think this is like 8 or 9 years ago, I started to notice mental health, what I at least perceived to be mental health issues among a lot of the students. And I guess the school administration or the CPS in general, they recognize those things too, because they start to offer us training on how to maybe deal more productively with people that might be having these types of challenges, even in the context of when they may have to be arrested, that maybe we can have a conversation with the police officer before they're taken away, that, okay, these are the issues that this child is having, so you're informed, and that can inform how you deal with them.
Well, we do a terrible job in this country on the whole for people that have mental issues to begin with. And I read some things that said, like, somewhere in the 80s when we came the me generation about greed and everything else, that we started to close a lot of these facilities down.
Mm-hmm.
We emptied out a lot of the mental facilities, and now there's a lot more schizophrenic people walking around on the street, which to me, bleeds into everything, right? Like, I mean, I get upset when I see, the guy that's a schizophrenic that got the gun and went into the school and shot the kid. Like, there should be no reason why a guy that's schizophrenic can qualify to get a firearm because he's schizophrenic. He actually hears voices that tell him what to do, and they're made up. They're not real. So yeah, there seems like, again, I think we're living in the corporation of America, where every year our corporate owners look at the bottom line and they say, what can we cut so we can keep making the profits and make a little more profit every year, even though these corporations, they're making so much money you could never spend it in 5 lifetimes. I just saw an article that said that the wealthiest family, I believe it's the Waltons, the people who own Walmart, make $4 million an hour.
Yes.
And to me, like, if you made $4 million in your life, you could retire and be done. You don't have to do a thing now. They make it hourly, and nobody's upset about this. This is not something that, and I mean, resources, no matter how you want to divide them up or how you want to look at them, they're finite. There's only so much wealth. There's only so much treasure on the planet. So every year, the country needs, the corporation that is America looks at it and says, well, these free lunches that are going on in the schools, that's something we could cut out. But they don't look at big oil and say, well, you're getting billions of dollars in subsidies, which is handouts to those companies, and say, well, we could pull that back and feed these kids. Like, it's a short-sighted situation as far as that goes. And then the Democrats are no good either. They just look to tax whatever that you can, like, I'm not a smoker, but marijuana is now legal.
Right.
So, and I have a couple people who are, and I've talked to them, they're upset about this. Like, and I've said, all right, let's, I want to have
about the legalization of marijuana.
And one of my buddies, man, I get upset just thinking about it. Lost his son to the opioid epidemic, and he started out with pot, right? So his feeling is that marijuana is a gateway drug. Now, I don't prescribe to that. I believe that there's certain people that were going to do heroin at one, whether marijuana exists or not, they were going to go there. And there's certain people that would smoke marijuana and never move on from that ever. They would just do that sort of thing. How does that affect? I also heard that they're going to expunge a bunch of records.
Well, see, that is the thing that I was looking at.
Right.
When you have these nonviolent offenders who are serving lengthy prison terms for marijuana.
Right. Well, those things lead on to, so one guy gets arrested for a couple joints in his pocket, and he ends up in prison. Then he does something wrong in there, and then he ends up in more trouble. Then he meets this guy, and they're like, hey, man, you have 5 years of your life been jacked up. When we get out of here, we could knock this guy off and get this. Then he ends up in there for 20. Now he's got a life sentence because originally, caught with a couple joints in his pocket.
Yeah. So I had an issue with that. And, it also reminds me of the Clinton administration and some of the criminal the policies that they put in place that led to some lengthy prison terms for a lot of black people. And that he was a Democratic president, but a lot
and
of
beloved
he was very popular in the African American community. But I don't really think that we were looking at, and I know I wasn't really paying attention at that age because of where I was at the time, but looking at his policies. And now I think more people are looking back and saying, well, wait a minute, look at these policies were very destructive for the African American community, and those things need to be revisited.
Sure. I mean, every generation is going to look back and be like, oh, we really screwed that up. I am curious to see what our kids' generation is going to look like 50 years after that generation gets to. They're going to look back at those people and go, I can't believe you said this and you did this and everything else. Now, I don't. There's a word that's been co-opted, and it bothers me because there's people out there that are social justice warriors that are fucking heroes for doing the things that they did. And the Rosa Parks, the people who did those are social justice heroes. They've co-opted that term and put it onto these people that like are mad about cultural appropriation and bathrooms and gender identify. Like, don't take that word. To me, that's upsetting because, like I said, I'm a big picture person. And I think it should be upsetting to someone who, if you were a big-time Alabama fan, right, and you loved Alabama and you loved that Confederate flag, and your thoughts are, I'm a rebel, and that's why I got this flag, and then you looked over and you saw the KKK guy flying that flag. If that was a beloved thing to you and you're not with them, you should go over there and beat that guy down. You can't have that thing that I like. You know what I mean? That's like when Donald Trump's waving some Bible bullshit around. If you're a Christian, you'd be like, hey, you can't have that.
Right.
Like, that's mine. That's beloved to me.
And your behavior does not represent that.
Right.
It does not represent that.
This flag, the Confederate flag, to me, the Confederate flag, all that is a reminder to you of where you could be. That, to me, that's what it is. And now to someone else, it might not be that.
Those symbols, it was a controversy fairly recently, last couple of years or so, about the monuments and things like that. Many of those monuments were put in place to represent to black people that were trying to vote that you will not vote. There will be put in strategic places, government buildings and places like that to say, we are still in charge, you will not vote. Up until say before the Voting Rights Act was passed, the last one in 1965, maybe about 5% of the black population in Mississippi was registered to vote. About 5%.
Right.
Those Confederate.
Let's do that math. 5% of the black population.
Yes, in Mississippi.
And right now, the African American people are one of the best voting blocks. They do their civic duty. I believe, I haven't seen the numbers, but I believe that the percentage of black people that vote is higher than the percentage of white people that vote. Percentage. The numbers are less, but that's a parenting issue. That's an issue where I've already told my sons, you're voting.
Right.
You just turned 18. We're getting you registered, and you're going to vote.
Right. You decide who you vote for.
Yeah, you're going to sit. I have nothing to do with that. But you're going to actually research who's doing what you think is right, and you're going to go vote. It's your civic.
You need to engage.
It's not an option. This is a thing that you need to go do. Like you're supposed to. And obviously, black parents have done a better job of that than white parents have, because the percentages are. I mean, maybe some of it's the fact that they've been oppressed too, and the harder you hold somebody down, the harder they come back after it. So that's all fine. But back to the monuments and all the other stuff. People don't want to understand what you're saying. They don't want that to be the case.
And I don't see those statues and melt emotionally. That's not what I'm saying. But they don't belong in government buildings. That's not where they belong.
No, I feel like if I was
a museum and
if I was an African American trying to go into a courthouse to seek justice, whether I'm the victim or the perpetrator of a crime, and I'm trying to get a fair shake in this situation, and I got to walk past the Robert E. Lee statue, I already know I'm not getting a fair shake. It's not going to work out.
And Confederates formed the Klan. And for a long period of time, the Klan was the law. The Klan was, they were the politicians. They were the police department. So if you have this in a courthouse, near a courthouse, what does that represent? To black people that know that.
Well,
and we should move, and we should definitely move. We should move past that.
And the way to move past that is to get rid of that.
Get rid of it.
That crap to begin with. And so, again, if everyone could just be big picture people, draw yourself back and go, okay, what's the ideal solution or resolution or end game to this situation? What do I really want out of this? Because if you're someone who just wants all the Mexicans and black people to go away, that's unrealistic.
That's not going to happen.
That's unrealistic. You don't get to say that. This country was formed on people who came from other places. At one time, your people came from another place. The white guy. But if your objective is, hey, could everybody just be a contributing force in society? Then it's in your best interest, if that's your thought, to get rid of those monuments. Because if you're a African American and you're saying, hey, I'm going to be a contributing part to this society, and my tax dollars go to maintaining and erecting these
Yes.
forms of oppression, why would I be a contributing factor to any of this? Why would I not take advantage of the situation because this is a system that's not set up for me, sort of thing. So I look at it like it's beneficial to everybody to get rid of that crap. You're a history teacher. How much history did you learn in your life from a statue? No, me neither. No, I mean, I read the plaque or whatever like that. But I mean, history that I really wanted to learn, I got a full bookshelf in there of stuff that I've read on, Andrew Jackson, George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, all that stuff. And that's the other one that drives me absolutely up the wall. I like Lincoln. I like a lot of the things he had to say. He was probably still a racist because of the time that he was alive in. But he was, yes, in the Republican Party. But the Republican Party was the progressive party at the time. If Lincoln was around today and modified to be in today's, he'd be Bernie Sanders. He'd be the radical left. So,
and see, there's a difference between recognizing Abraham Lincoln as an important president of the United States, an effective president of the United States, and people that try to make him the savior of black people.
Right.
That is something that does not, it's just not true.
No, it's right.
And then there were so many black people, black activists that worked on behalf of our people to get us to the point of freedom, to push the political agenda, to make emancipation something that became one of the war goals at a certain point. So it doesn't mean that you, like say I dislike Lincoln. It's not a personal thing. It's just you look at the facts and you say, well, no, this is not what he was about. These are his words when you look at the primary sources and things like that. And it goes, same thing goes for a lot of the other presidents in United States history. Now, you look at their policies.
We're about the same age. I think you're a year younger than me. It seems to me, and this seems funny to me, that it was easier when things were simpler. I remember being a kid and Columbus was a good person, right? And then somehow 10 or 15 years ago, Columbus became a bad person.
Right.
And now everyone that's woke can't stand Columbus. We want to rename things Indigenous Peoples Day, which I'm totally fine with. We change things we do all the time.
And it was that was bubbling. If you were in the right group, you would have heard what you heard later.
Sure.
You would have heard it earlier.
Right,
I heard those things a lot earlier.
Right.
But
it wasn't mainstream though.
It was not mainstream.
Right.
I have to teach about Christopher Columbus. I don't teach that he discovered America, because he did not discover America.
That's not right.
But his landing in what became the Americas had a huge impact on world history. That is what I teach. It's not about whether I personally like him or not. It's not about that. It's like, okay, what impact, good, bad, or otherwise, did his landing in what became known as the West Indies have on the world?
Right. It was the same goes for Lincoln though, right?
Yeah, same for Lincoln.
40 years ago, Lincoln was a much rosier picture than he was. And I equate that to the same thing as, I love the movie Tombstone. One of my favorite movies, right?
Me too.
It's right. It's great to watch this Western, and like all the detail and all that stuff is terrific to see. And then the problem that happens is I can't ever look at the Shootout at the OK Corral or what are some of the other ones? Okay, so like they did a movie, Brad Pitt did a movie where he was Jesse James. It was the coward something or other who shoots Jesse James
in the back.
Yeah, right. And it was Casey Affleck was Ford who shoots Jesse James. And it was slow, but it was terrific. It was all this like detail of what his aliases were, how he was, what handed he was, all this other stuff. And it was great. To me, it was like captivating. I loved all the detail and the fact that it was as true to history as it could possibly be. But it absolutely ruins ever me looking at some old Jesse James movie.
Right.
Because it's complete rubbish now because you've got the facts. So like for me, once I've got the facts and once I've got the details of how something is, it's impossible for me to turn back the clock and go, you know what? Christopher Columbus was great. He discovered America. Like, I can't say that anymore because I know that that's not the factual situation and the way it went down.
And and so a lot of people know this now, but it's like he wasn't even trying to come to the Americas. This was not his destination.
quick way to India.
It's okay.
Right. It's the guy who is driving his Buick and he hits the 13-point buck on the road. He mounts it.
Yeah.
Like you weren't hunting, dude. You just ran over on an accident. Right. No, I get it. So then that leads me to we talked about Black History Month, which was Black History Week.
It was Negro History Week. It started as Negro History Week.
Right. Now there's another one, right? When you watch something from the Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin era, and they're hanging out with Sammy Davis Jr., and they're saying this Negro, and that's not something that you can, like, it's like Oriental. That's not something that, and it almost is a thing where you have to keep up on, boy, if you were put into cryo sleep for 30 years and woken up and you were just talking when we were talking, people look at you like, have you lost your mind?
Yeah, what's wrong with you? You can't say
those
that.
things, right. So the one that drives me nuts with I see people that are of the same complexion I am, and they have less tolerance for an African American young man walking around with his pants hanging down than they do this complete redneck living in a trailer park, and he's the one guy that I actually like, I think he's funny because I think he's playing on it, is that catfish guy that's on YouTube, right? But there's people that are living like that, right? And everything else. And to me, I have no tolerance for that because you're reflecting on me. I don't do that. Like that's not cool, dude.
Well, you have a certain amount of African Americans that are really offended by sagging pants too, and you might see on Facebook, should there be sagging pants laws and blah blah. I don't like sagging pants, but that's not a criminal issue.
It's an expression. You can do
right. It's not a criminal issue, and we, meaning myself and a lot of other people, are offended by black males with sagging pants. But we live in a society where you have pornography all over television, like softcore porn. You're not offended by cleavage. You're not offended necessarily by an attractive woman showing her butt crack. But that young man, the black young male showing his pants, I don't like it. But that's a parenting issue, if anything. Yes. My son does not sag his pants. But when I see those young men,
I couldn't even imagine it, Kwame.
It's never going to happen.
Right.
I don't think that we need any other reason for a police officer to engage black males. You're walking down the street and the police officer gets to interact with you because your pants are hanging too low, which could have tragic consequences.
Sure.
And that's not something I would make a legal issue. That's a home issue. That's a parenting issue.
Right. There should be some rationale as to why you shouldn't do that. That's fine. But, so, there's people that are upset about it, and there's people that say things like, if there's going to be a Black History Month, why wouldn't there be a White History Month or a White Pride Month?
The public school system has been White History Month.
Right.
I mean... As part of the civil rights movement, what a lot of people don't understand, that, like I was mentioning, the black arts movement, you had protests where people were advocating for the inclusion of black people and other minorities in curriculums because it was not there. So this is something I think that even Samuel Jackson may have been involved in when he was in college. He was involved in protests like that to get black studies implemented into curriculums.
Right. So what I want you to do, though, is explain. So, like, I've got people that are in my life that have no connection with an African American guy, and certainly not with a guy that's as intelligent as you are. So, explain to them how
Black History Month came about.
Well, yes, I'd love that. That would be great information. But also how there's a difference between, and I draw the same distinction between the gay pride and the straight. They try to do a straight pride parade. You've never been ashamed of being straight.
White history, European history was never marginalized in America. It was never marginalized. So Carter G. Woodson, I forgot what school he went to.
It was actually romanticized. In fact,
when he was exactly when he was trying
Lincoln was not who he was. Columbus was not who he was.
No. When he was trying to study black history, he was interested in black history, and he was told that black people had no history, that they only had folklore. So his goal was to document black history. So he started the Journal of Negro History, and he wrote scholarly articles on Black history. Then he started Negro History Week. I forgot what year, but it was in the early 20th century. He started Negro History Week in the month of February, which eventually evolved into Black History Month. And the reason that he picked February was because Abraham Lincoln was born in February and Frederick Douglass, the abolitionist, was born in February. Some people make comments.
He's not alive anymore.
And they say, oh, well, they gave us, meaning white people gave us the shortest month. And they are ignorant of that history. They didn't give us anything. No, this was something that Carter G. Woodson, a black man, chose.
Right.
And that's how it came about. And it has nothing to do with disrespecting the accomplishments of people of European descent.
Right.
It's documenting things that were not documented. And you have to understand, too, that when he started this celebration, you might be half a century at the time out of slavery. So you have all of this social degradation of black people. You could go to stores and buy products in regular grocery stores that had the N-word on it.
Yeah.
And films that depicted black people in a negative way. So you can imagine what that might do to the self-esteem of a group of people. So he set about counteracting that in the way that he felt that he could.
Right. And I mean, some people are willfully ignorant on the situation, because I've gone to gun shows, I've gone to flea markets in the South and stuff like that, and the things you can find, they're appalling. I mean, you can find booklets of black people with photos of them hanging. You can find all kinds of the watermelon stuff.
Well, when lynching was at its height, some lynchings were announced in churches, and people would gather their families and they would go by the thousands to watch a lynching. I have a couple of books. One is by Ralph Ginsberg. It's called 100 Years of Lynching, and it's all articles of lynching. There's another one called Without Sanctuary, Lynching Photography in America. So it was a very common thing.
Right.
You could go to, say, a butcher shop, and they might have some body parts of a lynched African American on display in some cases, ears and other souvenirs. It was just something that was very open. Very much open.
So, I mean, and some of this, like when people act like they, don't understand the difference between White History Month, Black History Month, and stuff like that. Like, maybe I want to feel like maybe they don't know this existed. Maybe they don't know that, my dad used to do a thing where he traded or dealt in old currency, so like cowboy money.
Right.
But when you would go to those shows, you could always find a couple guys in there that had all of that crazy, they had everything from tickets to the World's Fair and everything else. And then you'd find the guy that's got all of the black paraphernalia. And you're like, oh my Lord, what are you doing with why is this? And people are buying this and putting it in a drawer somewhere in their house. I don't know why. I think I would, if I was an African American, I think I'd want to buy some of it just to preserve it, just to make sure.
I have some of it.
Right.
Replicas.
So
I have some of it.
There's a reminder of this is why you need a month set aside where you can say, hey, when you were in school, you didn't hear about this guy that helped build the railroad. You didn't hear about this guy that helped build the West and everything else. Or you didn't hear about the Tuskegee Airmen and all that kind of thing, because it just wasn't mainstream taught in the schools as far as that goes.
Yeah, it's not, and even now, it's still not taught in some schools where you have a large African American population. You might assume that a lot of black people are aware of black history in America or history before slavery in Africa. That's not necessarily the case.
Right. No, I think it's some of it's ignorance and some of it's willful ignorance. They don't want to know that sort of thing. And the podcast for me is a good way to talk about those sort of things. So maybe, because I think immediately when I met you, I always sort of got along with you, always sort of talked to you. Our sons were similar in weight, so they were always kind of practicing together and stuff like that. I don't know if your impression of me to begin with at any point was ever like, oh yeah, this guy might be a little bit, nutty with the race, anything like that. But I never even thought twice about it. And then we sort of touched on it, but we didn't. why did you drive from Chicago to take your son out to New Lenox? For God, I mean, that's a haul,
It
man.
was not necessarily intentional. What I was looking for, as I learned more about wrestling, IKWF and all of that, was that the wrestling season, the off season, was longer than the season.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. I had kind of like the same philosophy that I had about education, that in order for you to get better academically, you have to spend more time on academics.
Yeah, right.
So I knew that as he got older, I figured that the pool of wrestlers would thin out. The kids that did not do the off-season training, it's going to thin out. Yeah. And if you don't do off-season training, it's going to be apparent that you didn't do off-season training. And I wanted to always give my son the best opportunity in anything that I put him in. And I wasn't going to put him out there to get smashed. Right. So when he was maybe in, I think his second year, he might have been in third grade, he got demolished by this kid. I mean, he got mopped. And I remember him just looking up at the sky with all these like
now
tears in his eyes. And I'm like,
club, though,
yeah.
Right?
And I was looking at, no, he was with Rich Rattlers.
Rich Rattlers.
So
the demographics there, mostly African American.
Mostly African American. Right. So what happened was I was looking for off-season opportunities and trying to get some of the male parents in that club to take advantage of some of these off-season opportunities, because we had a nice, solid group of kids that I felt could get better.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, they just were not interested. So that was the year that I came to Storm. So I had no intention of staying there.
Okay. Sure. Yeah, with
but,
Way. Then
right. Storm Wrestling Academy in the off season. Then I said, okay, well, maybe I'll just keep him here. And honestly, I didn't necessarily realize how far it was from my job, or how many clubs I was driving past to get there.
Sure.
But I also like my son to be comfortable. So once he started to get comfortable and familiar, I said, I'm going to keep him there. And I think I drove from like South Loop, Chicago to New Lenox. I did that for about 5 years.
Now, as coaches, we were put on that we were unintentionally somehow treated Amir better than he was treated at Rich Rattlers as far as respect goes, for trying to develop them and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like they had athletes that they liked better there. So that was part of the reason why you were taking them out by us, was we were giving them a little more attention.
I think that he was just getting more. I think he was just getting some more advanced training.
Yeah, I'll tell you what I saw.
And it really bothered me to leave that club, because I loved that club.
Sure.
It was like a family. I really loved that club, and I really appreciate everything that they did for Amir. But I just felt that I needed to move him.
All I saw in Amir was a guy that was working harder than most of the other guys. So as soon as I see that, I gravitate towards that. And if I got any tips for the guy that's working harder, that's what I couldn't care less what color he was or anything. And wrestling for me has been it's a real gateway to not worrying about race or religion or any of that stuff, because we've got a lot of Muslims that are there, and I have never seen a group of people more. So some of these people, I think the Alawales and stuff like that, all the parents all lived in wherever they came from. I don't even know if it's Iran or Iraq or wherever they came from, Afghanistan. I don't know. I never asked them, but they packed up everything that they had, moved out of those countries to a place that they're for sure the minority. In fact, they're probably, for a lot of people, disliked. And they assimilated awesome. They're going to Bears games. Their kids are playing football. Their kids are wrestling. And for me, anybody who puts their kid in wrestling has automatically got a little bit of a pass from me, because somehow you're smart enough to understand what's going on here and see the value in what's happening. So then you're automatically on another level with me. You know what I mean? When I see the kids walking by and they're taking their kids to football or basketball, I'm like, you got it all wrong, man. So the Muslim thing is another one that I got friends that are real upset about. And like, if you knew him like I knew him, maybe
being upset about Muslims in the United States. I see a lot of people saying things like they want to institute Sharia law. I'm like, I've never gotten that impression.
No, I don't even know where they're getting that from. I mean, I think they want to be able to practice their religion the way they want to, and they don't want to be infringed on that. I don't think they should
like
be.
anybody else.
But they don't want you to practice their religion.
Right.
I don't think it's that way. I think that Christians are more overtly want you to practice their religion than, like we want laws that reflect our Christian beliefs more than I see Muslims do it. But I mean, I don't watch the same news, so I mean, maybe they're seeing that somewhere or something like that.
It's got to be coming from somewhere.
Right. No one I've ever talked to has had that mentality on anything, so I don't know.
And I like to, when people say that, I mean, I'll read something and I'll listen, but no one has ever really given me a convincing argument that that's the case.
I'm a firm believer in the separation of church and state, so I don't think that it should be. I don't think that any religion should tell me how to live my life. If I'm not a religious person, then, there's got to be laws for things. That's the one gun control thing I get into all the time. Like, if you can't make laws that pertain to gun control because criminals don't follow laws, then no laws.
Then why should you have laws at all?
Any laws, right? Which don't make any sense, and it just sounds as dumb as saying, until you think about it. But yeah, so I mean, I wanted you to come on the podcast because I wanted to put someone out there that is intelligent, speaks intelligently, has a background in history of all things for sure, and maybe some of the people who have hard feelings for, African Americans could maybe get a different look at it. You know what I mean? And be like, all right, because most of these people, even though they may have those feelings, like they understand who I am.
Right.
And we get along just fine and everything else. So they'll maybe look at it and be like, hey, Bill gets along with the guy fine. They had a 2-hour conversation, and maybe they can glean something from it because maybe they're just not exposed to it in the right way.
I would think so because a lot of times, people don't talk.
Right.
And if you have a disagreement, people take it personally. And then sometimes you lose sight of what you were even talking about because you start to make personal comments about the person that have nothing to do with what the topic is. You see it all the time on the internet when politics or religion come up.
And for me, that's just it's a baseline of facts. And if I am glad to change my view on something if the facts I had were not really the facts. If
most people are not that way.
Right. No, but I mean, if somebody that I disagree with adamantly on, if someone could show me that trickle-down economics works, they could actually point it out.
Right.
Because I look at it like, hey, we started doing this dumb shit in the early 80s, and this is how we got to where we're at right now. And if you look at the numbers, CEOs are making 900% more money than they were in the 80s, and the working guy's making 11% more than he was in the 80s, and that hasn't kept up with the inflation.
Right.
My dad would say stuff like when he made $4 an hour as a butcher, he had more money in his pocket than when he made $30 an hour as a butcher because of inflation, the way that it didn't go up with it. So, if someone wants to show it to me, maybe I'll take another economic look at it, but until you can show me how this has worked out, and it hasn't, is the problem. The problem is I've got reality on my side, and they don't, but they get upset. So like I'm real liberal with everything social, but when it comes to I don't want to see the Second Amendment gone. I think that people should have the right to bear arms, but I don't believe that the right to bear arms is because we're somehow going to take over our government. I believe that in the Constitution it was put there so that if another country came in, you could take up arms and defend yourself. Not the fantasy of taking over your own country with your shotguns you bought at Walmart is a dumb way to think about things.
That doesn't work.
So it's not realistic. But like I said, I want sensible gun laws for the same reason that the guy who doesn't want any gun laws. I want it because it preserves the Second Amendment. If things get so bad that we're at a point where someone says we're going to get rid of the Second Amendment, things must have gotten really, really bad.
Yeah.
And I think we're actually headed there. I think the sentiment publicly is changing on things. I don't know, how that's going. And to be somebody in the you work every day in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
Do you fear for your life every day because of the news saying that so many people get killed and all that?
No, growing up there, it's gotten worse since when I grew up, but it's not something that you think about all the time. But I do frame my decisions around the fact that there is danger, and I have discussed these things with my son. Like, for example, going to this particular store in this particular area is not necessarily a good idea.
Good.
Stopping at this gas station, no.
Sure.
Or going to the gas station late at night, not a good idea.
Right.
Be careful with who you associate with. Don't get into arguments with people. For example, I remember driving to the high school I was working at, and a guy is blocking the street, and he's just leaning into the car talking, just decides to block the street. I put my car in park, and I enjoyed my coffee and my music.
Yeah, right.
Because if I honk the horn at him, which is what he wants,
yeah,
now I have a confrontation. Right.
Okay, so let me ask you this. Why not, you're a guy that's got education, you've got tenure with the schools and stuff like that, you got a background. Why not just move to super safe neighborhood and get out of there?
Well, one of the things is if you work for the city of Chicago, you have to live in the city of Chicago.
Okay.
They have a residency requirement.
Yeah, but why not just work for Naperville?
No, I actually prefer being around kind of in the environment that I grew up in. Even though it can be a tough environment, it's been tough, but it's been very fulfilling.
Right, so you're giving back.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that.
I had a former student look me up on Facebook, and I get this sometime. He was in my inbox, and he was saying, "Hey, this is so-and-so," and I couldn't quite picture who he was at first because it's been so many years.
Sure.
And, I just want to thank you because you did this for me, and you bought me some T-shirts when my shirts were dirty, and, I'm 30 years old now, and, those types of things.
Little things like that are huge help.
They give you a little bit of energy to continue because it can be very tough.
I'll tell you what, I've had no more fun or no more happiness than when I see somebody that's like, 25 years old or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, coach.
Yeah.
I'm like, get out of here. Really?
Yeah.
I coached you for like 2 years when you were whatever. And, then you moved on or you went to the next room and I wasn't coaching anymore. But I'm still coach. So that's great. You know what I mean? It's good to give back, and everybody should. For me, that's my form of patriotism. You don't see me. I got flags on my house, but you don't see me waving them. Like, that's not my thing. I mean, I love the flag. I love the anthem. When they play them at the wrestling meets, I hand on my heart and I'm mouthing the words. But my form of patriotism is to do something else for other Americans, and then that's what helps the country get better,
right?
Sort of thing. I gave an analogy to a buddy of mine that's really into that, like nationalism stuff, and I said, listen, the difference between nationalism and patriotism is one's kind of obnoxious and the other one's helpful.
Helpful, yeah.
So, if I live in my neighborhood and I'm out there all the time and I'm working on my house and I'm quietly doing it and I'm making my house as the best house it can be in the whole neighborhood, and I'm doing everything. It's painted, it's polished, it's just beautiful, my home, right? And it becomes the best home in the neighborhood. That's patriotism.
Right.
If I just get on my bike and I ride around town hollering, my house is the best house in the neighborhood, and I'm waving a picture of my house around, that's nationalism and obnoxious.
Nationalism has been historically connected to racism and imperialism and colonialism, because when I become the best, then I feel that you are the least, and I have to export my way of life to you.
Yes.
And I'm going to make you better, but you are still inferior.
Right.
That's how some people have practiced their nationalism.
Right.
And you can't question.
You can also dehumanize someone because you're not.
It involves dehumanization.
Right.
And you can't question the government. Questioning the government is unpatriotic.
Yeah, which I try and keep a balance in that. So I voted for Barack Obama twice, and after the second time I was a little let down. I was actually a little bit like, dude, that second time out, you took more money from Goldman Sachs than anyone else has ever taken. You're a sellout, and it bothers me.
Yeah.
Like, I had such high hopes for this, and it didn't really go where I wanted to go.
And as a black man, you will have people that feel that, some black people, that will feel that he is above criticism because he's a black man. We're not in his fan club.
Right. Right.
We're his constituents, and we need to hold him accountable just as we would hold anyone else accountable.
Sure.
He's articulate. He has a beautiful
I
family.
would argue you got to hold him more accountable.
Great.
Because he's representative.
Right, great.
Of,
He's articulate. He's got a beautiful family. We love it. Okay, fine. What are the policies? But you have a certain element that would say if you question him that you are somehow disloyal to black people, and
Sure.
I don't think that that's right
I would
or smart.
I would argue also that Donald Trump's the best thing that ever happened to Barack Obama. I mean, to see that contrast between a guy who handled, crisis in the right way, to speak correctly, to all this other stuff. I mean, he was criticized for wearing a tan suit,
Right.
and stuff like that. So to be the guy who carried himself in this way, look at his family is all together. I keep seeing this thing that I haven't fact checked about his daughter getting arrested, which I don't know if it's nonsense. But so they're trying to make it some screwy thing, but then to have this guy who can't spell and he can't have a coherent sentence and he's just saying all these things. I mean, my thing with the Trump supporters, it's either you're three things: you're ignorant to the racist things he does, or you don't care about the racist things he does.
Well,
or you're a racist.
We talked a little bit about this, the nuance of racism, where people will defend Trump and say, well, look, he got an award for doing this for black people.
Yeah.
He can't be racist.
Right.
You had racists in the abolition movement. You had civil rights activists that were racist.
Right.
You have different levels to it. As I said, we mentioned that you might have a racist that would be very much in favor of lynching black people, where you might have another racist who says we need to follow the letter of the law. I'm not going to join the Klan, but I will join the White Citizens Council. We wear shirts and ties. We don't wear sheets.
Sure.
It's not all just,
right.
There's some gray area.
In the year 2019,
there's a lot of gray
2020,
area.
Anything, if you're abiding by it, then you're, just like we talked about the Germans being, if you're turning a blind eye to it, you're abiding that situation. You can't do that. You need to be able to say, if it's like the Kavanaugh thing, and that they found that woman at a Republican thing, and they showed her the problems with the guy, and they're like, well, I didn't know that there was these problems. And then they had another woman that, because of the news she watched, she didn't realize in the Mueller report that there was any problem at all. And then they showed the 10 instances of obstruction of justice, and she's like, I didn't know that was actually what was going on. That's not, I feel a little bit different about it. I think the baseline of facts and information is the best way for those things to get out to people so they can understand it. Now, everybody takes it to an extreme. Like I said, we didn't talk about it, but like my question would be like, I don't get cultural appropriation. If I want to wear dreadlocks, can I?
Yeah, you can.
I mean,
if you have
why would
if you have respect. I think one of the problems is that in many cases black people may not be welcome in certain areas, but black culture is. And this has been a huge
That's a fact.
This has been a huge problem. Like even if you just deal with music, like the history of say rock and
Elvis.
roll or whatever, where for a long time certain radio stations would not play a song by a black artist, but they would have say a white artist, maybe like Pat Boone or the Diamonds or some of those other groups, and they would record the black music and make it more palatable for the white audiences because they did not
Some of them,
want...
if you didn't look at them, you wouldn't know they weren't black.
Right.
I mean, Dusty Springfield, you would think was a black woman until you're like, oh, she's as white as can be. Holy cow. But she's faking it, that sort of a thing. Right.
So when you talk about like, say, dreadlocks, for example, or black people wearing natural hair, in many mainstream instances, black people wearing their hair the way it naturally comes out of their scalp is offensive to certain people. And like when you think about corporate America or something like that, it's just now becoming more acceptable for black people, even among black people, to wear natural hairstyles.
Right. Okay. Yeah, so you're just saying like, I mean, just so I'm getting this, because, I'm not, I'm not a woke white dude. If a guy just grows just a straight up afro,
and I don't mean unkempt, that your hair's, I don't mean that.
So
I mean you've groomed
Eddie
yourself.
Murphy's haircut was fine, or not fine.
No, that might have been okay.
Okay.
But it was more
But
so.
Billy D. Williams
That was more like a
Like a
perm.
white guy's, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, 'cause he
that
was
was very acceptable.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
Right. So,
very
yeah.
palatable.
Right. Even amongst the black.
Even amongst black people, because it's a bit longer story than I have time to tell, but part of the degradation of slavery was the shame of being black. Everything black, everything about you is bad. So part of that black arts movement that I mentioned, and the black is beautiful and all that, was embracing the fact that, okay, I am proud of my dark skin. I'm proud of my natural hair. I'm going to wear my hair natural. I'm proud of this.
Right.
That was a struggle even among black people, because the previous generation, you typically permed your hair, you pressed it to be more like white people.
Yeah, right.
You conked your hair.
Right. Sure. Okay. All right.
So that was a struggle, and it still is.
Yeah. Right. No. Well, I mean, I see it a lot too, where a lot of the black women are wearing all the wigs and everything else, and it looks like, white hair as far as that goes. It may be black, but it's
absolutely. We spend millions of dollars, if not billions,
right.
buying other people's hair.
Right.
Which is your choice, but it's one thing to purchase weave, and that's what you want to wear, but it's another thing to look down upon the way your hair naturally comes out of your scalp. Okay. That's a whole nother problem.
Well, all right, we'll wrap it up here, but I hope that things are. It seems like things are moving in the right direction. I think that we've hit like I think it's an ebb and flow thing, where we've kind of hit this Trump thing. We brought a lot of people out of the closet that were, had these things to say in private, but now they're saying it in public, which is a little weird. But also, I hope that people of any color could listen to this podcast and could maybe glean something different than maybe the feeling that they had about something else. But I got one other question for you, and that is, so we talked about the admonishing, the records of people that were, marijuana affected as far as
nonviolent offenders.
But how do you feel about society as a whole and the African American community as a whole? Is legalizing it going to be a good thing or a bad thing?
I think that remains to be seen. Personally, I mean, I don't smoke marijuana. I think smoking, period, is bad, but
I can't function on it, so
I've tried
it.
I'm not exactly sure. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to go.
Right.
That's a good question.
I just worry about people that are marginalized, and then they're being. And I think one of the economic aspects that bothers me is there were all these conservatives who were prosecuting people for this thing,
right,
who are now invested in those businesses. I do see it. The reason why we should, like, I don't want to say culture appropriate, but maybe put people that were in that community that were, if it was a cultural thing for them to do, if you're a Rastafarian guy, then maybe you should have the first opportunity to open the distillery or, the place to make some money off of a situation
that would be nice, but the way I'm seeing some of these laws that are being implemented as far as what you need to do to get into that business, it's pretty tough.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's pretty expensive.
Already. Right.
Yeah, you're not going to.
That's to me the stuff that
you don't have the means. Most people just don't have the means.
Right.
To do
if
that.
White and black and Mexican and yellow, we could all get together and understand that. Listen, there's a game being rigged here, and it's rigged in a situation where they see a big profit in something, and then they start investing in it. It's the same as the oil industry puts out all this propaganda about wind being a terrible thing, but in the background, they're investing in wind and renewables because they're going to convert themselves into that money-making situation.
And they'll have a head start.
Right, exactly. But the propaganda is, the dumb shit that it causes cancer and kills birds. But, really it's going to make a lot of money and it's going to be a safer world and all the other stuff. But thanks so much, man. I appreciate you coming out. And I mean, I hope I didn't step over any lines asking any questions.
All the questions were... I was open to pretty much anything.
Good. I just want to ask as many tough questions as I can to try and get, whatever thoughts, or especially, like I said, I have tons of respect for you. I have tons of respect for, I didn't give so much of a background of what I think of you, but I mean, you seem to be an outstanding parent. Your pictures on Facebook, you look like you're a really good cook.
Thanks.
So, I mean, you're doing a hell of a job with your son Amir. He's a terrific young man. So I have all the respect in the world for you, and then the fact that you've got the education that you've got, and you're doing the things you're doing to giving back to your neighborhood and everything else. I want a guy like that on the podcast for sure.
I appreciate
if I
that.
can find anybody else with another angle, let me know. If I hate to say it, but if there's somebody out there that is totally for segregate, like wants to go back to the 40s and 50s, and you want to get on there and tell me about it, I'm not going to agree with you, but I'll gladly listen to what you have to say. Maybe we can get out in the open. Maybe we can find some common ground where we can move ahead and get this thing not. The violence is the problem, and sometimes I look at some of the societal things that go on, and I think we're a powder keg at some points.
I think so too. Before those recent mass shootings took place, I was having a conversation with a friend, and I'm not saying that I blame Donald Trump. It's all his fault. It's not what I'm saying. But what I did say to him was that some of this rhetoric is very, very dangerous. It's irresponsible. And as the president, as a leader, he needs to be more cautious of what he lets come out of his mouth.
That's where I draw the issue. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump. It has nothing to do. If Donald Trump was a private citizen and he wanted to pay for time on TV to say shitty things about people, well, great. You can do that. That's just fine. But when you're the president of the United States, it holds more weight.
It holds more weight.
Right. And you can't just... You can't dehumanize the squad. You can't, none of that stuff. You can't do that stuff. Like that's anti-American.
And if I say I don't agree with him, say for example, dehumanizing the squad, people think that means that I'm just a strong supporter of the squad. It doesn't. I
don't really care either way with the squad.
Right.
They're not representative of me.
No.
They're not in my district. I don't know. For my joke always on Facebook is the right has made AOC the most famous. Nobody would know who she was if it wasn't for those people. If I look at the news feed on there, it's post after post about this woman.
Right.
That I post maybe 3 of them just to jab back at her a little bit for fun. But I wouldn't. She's in some little district in New York. I couldn't care less. But it's crazy. So, but thanks again.
Thank you.
Hope everybody gets something out of this. I got to tag it off all the time because I'm always looking for subscribers to my YouTube channel. I don't do this for any money. If you would please let me know what you think about what I'm doing here. I'm doing it for great conversations. I'm doing it for information and a long format. So if I could, get a couple more subscribers on YouTube, if you'll pass it around to your friends, I'd really appreciate it too.
Sure will.
All right. Thanks, man.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I thought it went good.
Cool.